I am unashamed. What about you?
I'm a little bit intimidated, Jace.
Are you?
We walked into this room. This is a much more feminine touch than we're used to. I mean, this is.
Well, yeah.
I mean, this is beautiful.
I think that's you, your inner self, saying we could do better at our studio.
I think we can do better.
I've been to your studio. Believe your studio. I couldn't believe that was a studio. I'm like, this is the garage. This is fully the garage. When do we go in?
Because you guys are walking in. Yeah. So what? Is this an upgrade?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. No, I've been to the studio, and it's like, I know you guys have resources. Just like, I know Phil wants to keep the same house he's lived in for 60 years, but the studio, it's a podcast.
It is.
It's a popular podcast. You can have like, what do you call it? Insulation in the building, all that kind of stuff. So we're at Annie Downs' That Sounds Fun podcast
Thank
offices.
you, Annie.
Yeah.
So thanks for letting
And
us
if you're
host it.
listening and you're like, who are these other people in the room?
Sure.
If you're watching, you know. But if you're not watching, you're listening. We have Dallas and Amanda Jenkins in. Thank you guys for coming on from The Chosen, which that's also intimidating because you've already started directing in here before we even started, which is great.
Yeah, before we started rolling,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, you want to scoot in?
Yeah.
The lighting, can you adjust the camera a little
Directing is the
bit?
nice word. He's bossing. He's
Yeah,
bossing.
yeah.
That's great. This is awesome.
Yeah, that's what you can start to think of when
At
we're
home.
parenting at home. I'm just
He's just
directing.
directing.
Yeah, I'm doing what God made me to do.
Yeah.
And we're in Nashville.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Unashamed on the road.
Unashamed on the road. Jason and Zach are here. Obviously, Phil did not make the trip.
I'm not Phil, by the way.
Not Phil.
This is Missy.
Or Al. Al's gone as well, but we're glad to be here. So, Jason, tell the audience what are we doing in Nashville with the Jenkins family?
Yeah, I think sometimes in life there's like, how did this happen?
Mhm.
And the details are kind of cool. And it worked out perfect because my dad, Phil, had a procedure yesterday done on his back. So that's why our listeners and viewers haven't seen him for a while. But all stories have said that went well. So we'll see. We're in Nashville, so I haven't been able to visit. But I think he's doing good. But what happened was, I believe, Missy, you somehow got a hold of the movie that is coming out. I'm going to let you say the name so I don't screw it up.
Oh, well, Kingdom Story Company, who is the marketing company for this movie, correct?
Yeah, the one of the production companies.
Okay,
yeah.
so they reached out to me to ask me if they could send me a link to watch it and then help partner in marketing it. And when, of course, I mean, it's Dallas's stuff. So I'm like, yes, absolutely.
Because we've known each other for now a couple of years. And
Yes.
That's true, but I want to just say, in full transparency, because we're friends, when Missy said that in her discussion, she said, "Oh, and Jace is in too." And I said, "Hang on,
I volunteered him.
He's got to
said,
earn that.
I'm gonna need to watch this movie."
I
And
rolled my eyes like,
she
it's
did.
Dallas.
And I said, "True, but it's hard to hit a home run every time." I was like, "I need to watch."
It is, actually.
Yes.
I agree with you. I would be more like you. I'm super like, I love that last thing. Prove yourself again. Like I'm a little more like that.
That's what I did. And look, I'm gonna have to admit, well, we started watching the movie, and for my personality and what I do, I'm an outdoors person. And I was thinking, well, this is a kind of a kid's movie. In the first 10 minutes, I was really like, I'm not sure where this is going, because I obviously hadn't read the book. I hadn't heard of the book.
Mm.
And so I was like, Dallas made a kid's movie. This is kind of weird.
Yeah, it's called The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. I don't know if we've
Yes,
mentioned that
thank
yet,
you for saying
okay.
that.
Yeah, so it's a book that's been out for about 50 years. The movie's called The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. And so, yeah, go ahead.
So if you've been living under a bridge or in the wilderness and you hadn't heard of that.
Right.
So I was kind of questioning it at first, but as I journeyed through the movie and as it was ending, which I was kind of wiping a few
Okay,
tears
hold
from
on.
my
Before we
eyes.
get to the ending, can I tell you how it started with
Yeah.
us? Okay, so
Okay.
I know I'm leaning into this microphone. Is that what I'm
Yeah,
supposed to be doing?
I think just lean
Okay,
in.
we're
Yeah,
good.
and,
Okay.
and by the way, we have 4 mics, 5 people.
Yeah.
We're trying to make this work. So.
Jason and I are sharing, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
So we're about 10 minutes here watching on our laptop is what we're doing. And so I'm watching it and I'm hearing how it's going. It's done a little differently, to me.
Yeah, the opening
So-
comes in with like a kind of a quick montage
Yeah.
And
and
it's
it's
a-
narration.
It's
and-
narration,
Yeah,
so it's from a child's perspective, but you hear an adult voice. And so I'm trying to figure out where is this going? I don't quite understand what's happening. And about 10 minutes into it, I reached over and I pushed pause and I said, I got it. A Christmas Story.
Yeah.
And Jace, he said, what? I don't know what you're talking about. I said, A Christmas Story. You know, Ralphie, Pink Bunny, fuzzy ears.
Yeah, the movie, yeah.
And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, leg lamp. You know, the leg with the lamp and the tongue stuck to the tree. And he said, I literally have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh.
I've never seen.
That needs to be the next thing you do. You need to get out of the wilderness. Like, there's a lot of good stuff going on inside.
But once I got that, Dallas, I was all in. I knew exactly what it was. I loved it from start to finish. And then now you can talk about how you felt at the end.
Well, I loved it. I thought it was a clever way to introduce Jesus. And it's a little deeper movie after you watch it, as far as how you think about, what just happened. And so I think I immediately picked up my phone and I sent you a text.
Yeah, no, I just saw your movie and you were very positive about it. But you got a little teary?
I did.
Yeah,
and that's not normal for me, although it's happening a lot more often these days. So we just did our Mia Moo fundraiser, so it's hard not to have a few tearful moments in that. But I thought it was fantastic. And so I was telling you, whatever we need to do, which is why we're here today, because what are we calling this tonight? The grand premiere?
No, this is a Nashville screening special, kind of a lot of local musicians, kind of a VIP screening that we're doing. And so we invited you guys. It's cool that Kingdom reached out to you. I didn't even know that. Because I would have said to you guys, hey, I'd love for you to watch the movie and maybe let's talk about it. But I didn't want to necessarily just ask for a favor, but then you called and you go, hey, Kingdom sent me the movie. And
You could have asked for the favor.
I was like, Kingdom, I could have asked them myself. We're friends. But so you guys came into Nashville. I said, look, we're going to be here. What if we recorded the podcast while we're together? And so it worked out nicely. But the thing that the reason I knew that you would like it, even though on the surface it's a Christmas family movie that is funny and whatnot, but it might not be the kind of thing you normally would be drawn to. Right. But it is what this is about is kids, the basic story is the Herdmans are the worst kids in the world. Everyone in town hates them because they're bullies and they're mean and they smoke cigars, which scandalizes everybody. And so it's told, like you mentioned, from a kid's perspective, but it's an adult telling the story it's similar to A Christmas Story, where the adult is telling the story, but remembering her life as a kid. And so you're seeing the Herdmans through these childlike eyes, and everything's exaggerated. But as a parent, you start to see below the surface that, these are kids with absentee parents. These are kids who haven't heard the Christmas story before. So these 6 kids go to church because they hear their snacks. They end up taking over the church's big town Christmas pageant and take over all the roles. They're playing Mary and Joseph. And everyone thinks it's going to be a disaster, and at first it is. But because these kids haven't heard the story before, they're asking all these questions. And the people who've heard it 100 times, who are taking it for granted, are actually learning a little bit more about the story because of this outsider
and
perspective.
through their eyes, through the eyes of kiddos that are the least of these. That's what we love about it. It's actually who Jesus came for.
And I know you guys have such a heart for kids and for kids who are maybe in poverty, or kids who are, the kids like how you grew up in some ways,
Well, I was fixing to say, Dallas, we were those kids. There's only been a few movies that kind of capture that. I mean, one of them, there was I think Kevin Costner did a movie called The War, and my wife and I, went and saw it, and she was just like, "Oh, yeah, it was okay," and I was like over here
needing therapy after.
Yeah, needing therapy, and she's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "That was my childhood," and she was like, "What?"
Right.
I was like, "That was pretty much it. Like, where are the parents? Where are they at?"
That's why you weren't watching a Christmas movie. You guys were watching Friday the 13th and.
Well, I've
said, no, it was Halloween. I'd go to visit. That's the kind of movie.
No, I've said this every year for Christmas. Here's what my parents did. Now, this is post-Jesus, but, it was bumpy the first few years.
Sure.
I remember, I think I was 9 or 10. We could look up when this movie came out. But we went to the Dollar Theater as a family for Christmas, and we watched Charles Bronson in Death Wish.
My goodness. My parents wouldn't even let me read about those movies.
That's your next film right there. Death Wish 7.
And it was, then the reason I remember it so vividly, because every time there was like nudity or something, my mom would just slap me to cover up my eyes. And like all this profanity, she's like, don't you ever say that.
Threatening you, hitting
She's
you.
narrating the movie of what not to.
Yeah, but they've been sanctified. The family's grown quite a bit since the early days.
Well, it is, but it's funny, but that's just the truth. That's what there's like family night Christmas movie. But my dad, he didn't want to watch a regular Christmas movie.
Right.
Like,
See, that's why you missed out on some of these classics like A Christmas Story.
How did you get, so had you read the book? Like, how did the whole thing, how did you get, because you've been doing The Chosen, which has been wildly successful.
Yeah.
I mean, I just told you guys out in the hallway, I mean, you guys broke something when you started that. That's good. It needed to be broke. But how do you go from that to, how did you find out about this?
So this came first. So I'll just tell the story because it's very much a God story. But 20 years ago, Amanda brought the book home from Pottery Barn. It was just on the
Pottery Barn Kids, where I would go and just play with my kids and not ever buy anything because that's who we were at that time. But there was like a $3 book at the counter. I was like, something I can afford. And I had remembered reading it growing up.
Yeah, as a kid.
Yeah.
So I read it in public school. And then I'd seen there was a TV movie back in the early 80s with Loretta Swit from MASH.
Yeah.
Was like played the mom who helps run the pageant. And so I remembered it as a kid, but I didn't remember a whole lot about it. So we bring the book home. We're going to read it to our kids. So I start reading, and it has a similar start to the movie. You know, it's right away. The first sentence of the book is, the Herdmans were absolutely the worst kids in the history of the world. They lied, they stole, they smoked cigars, even the girls. So I'm starting to chuckle, and I'm laughing in the first couple chapters. Well, then fairly early on, I get emotional just from these little hints that she would drop. Like one of the lines in the movie that I thought also, and from the book that I thought you'd appreciate is at one point, the Herdmans show up to church for the first time and they sit in Sunday school and they're asking all these questions and they're confused. And at one point they hear about the pageant. She's like, what's a pageant? She's like, it's a play. He goes, what's it about? And Beth says, it's about Jesus. And Imogene goes, everything here is. And I thought, how great for a church to be known for everything here being about Jesus. So she's saying it from an annoyed perspective, and I'm getting emotional. And so then we get to the end of the book, the last chapter. I can't read it. I am crying so hard. Tears are streaming on my face.
The kids, our little kids were so confused. Like, what's
going on?
So Amanda goes, give me the book. I'll read it.
I was
Because you
kind of
can't do
annoyed.
it.
I was like, oh, good.
She takes it. She starts weeping. I take it back from her. So we're trading the Christmas tree.
Sentence by sentence.
Yeah.
So you go, your turn now.
Because the, I won't give spoilers away, but the ending just really ties so much together. And you see the church learns from the Herdmans because of their outsider perspective. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I know you've experienced personally, is that a lot of times growing up in poverty or growing up as an outcast brings you closer to the heart of the gospel and the heart of the Christmas story than even those of us in our more suburban American visual of it and how much we've taken the story for granted. Yeah. So the church learns from them, but of course they give the church something that these kids need, which is Jesus and of course this community.
I want you guys to check out NetSuite by Oracle. Jace, you know a little something about Oracle.
I do. I know very little, but I didn't know, the details. But full clarification, I own shares in this company.
Well, and look, NetSuite is kind of like, everybody's trying to figure out what's the market going to do? Is inflation going to be up or down? It's kind of people wondering how things are going. We all do. But what this company does is they have helped prepare 38,000 businesses for the future. And they do this with the number one cloud, ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth that gives you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time looking at what's coming next. And that's what we want to do in business. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/Phil. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/Phil. Check them out, netsuite.com/Phil.
Well, and just on that note, the church had been putting on the pageant every year for decades, and it was pristine and everything was cleaned up, and Mary was in like all white, and it was like the halo around baby Jesus.
Right.
And what the Herdmans do is they come in and they actually show what a real stable would be like, and what they perceived a good gift for Jesus to actually be. And you're like,
they're like gold,
really...
frankincense, and myrrh. What kind of kid wants that? Why don't we give him a better gift? So it's all those types of questions that were really moving to me. What would it be like for these kids to have not heard the story before? And in a minute, because there's a significant connection to The Chosen, my desire to tell stories of Jesus, but from a more authentic perspective than the kind of, stained glass window painting statue perspective we've had. So anyway, we're weeping at the end of the book. It's so moving. And I'm thinking, this story is so unique in that it's genuinely funny, genuinely, legitimately well told, and yet very much a Jesus story, so well told that they're reading this book in public schools. And yet this is a Jesus story.
Which is incredible because it's,
it is on the, you've seen it now. It's we don't shy away from what the gospel is and what the Christmas story is, but it just doesn't feel like a churchy, movie that you have that you're doing as homework. So anyway, I closed the book and I said, I have to make this movie. I am the only one who can do this because I love kids. I love troubled kids. The humor of it, the pathos of it is my style. The Christmas of it all. I love Christmas. My favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life. So that's a movie with Jimmy Stewart. Came out.
Come inside.
I'll put that on the list.
Surely you've heard of It's a Wonderful Life.
I've heard of it.
Oh my goodness. You're just killing me. It's killing me.
You said Outlaw Josie Wells, and he's like,
Outlaw Josie Wells.
That's his language. That's his speed.
The Robertsons are known as like true Americana, and yet you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life. I think it's been
because they're experiencing Americana. They're outside experiencing
We're
just
gotta remember.
observing it.
We're watching them.
I'm saying this, but when we were kids and my dad came to Christ, everything became outdoors, and we hunted, we fished. Like TV was boring. There's nothing here that's appealing to me. Yeah. So that's why I miss it.
I could say the exact same thing you just said, but just reverse the terms. Outside was so boring. Inside, TV is where the action was at.
And that's why you guys are good friends. You're like
exactly. We're opposites attract, and that's why we watch Duck Dynasty, is to watch other people experience the outdoors while I was in an air-conditioned room watching it on television. So anyway, I said, I Googled to find out who had the rights to this as a movie. And I tracked down these guys who had been friends with the author. She's no longer with us, but they held the rights. And I gave them this hard pitch about how I was born to make this movie. And they're like, well, we've already got it set up at this big studio, and there's another director attached, a big-time director. And so I was just so upset. I'm like, so I wrote down in my calendar on my computer and my phone this phrase, pray for pageant. And I just said it for once a week. Once a week it would pop up, and I would pray that God, I tried to do like the please let your will be done, and I'll be happy with whatever your will is.
But also please sabotage everything.
But please don't let anyone else do this, and may you send your angels to prevent anyone else from directing this movie.
But thy will be done.
But thy will be done, and I'll rejoice regardless of whether I have it or not. All that other
that other Christian nonsense.
Yeah. So, and I would tell Amanda sometimes, let's pray for Christmas pageant. And every year we'd read it and get more and more intent on the fact that I need to do this, right? So I would check in every year, and I would sometimes just Google, is there any news on the movie? And nothing would happen with it for a while. So very long story short, a couple times we got really close. Like the rights would elapse with the studio, and the original rights holders would say, oh yeah, now they're free and available. And I'm like, okay, please. Like, I have to make this.
Me. Yeah.
And they would finally, about 5 years ago, I had this big opportunity because they're like, all right, now we've been frustrated with the studio system. They had a meeting with me. And then a couple of weeks later, I get on the phone and they say, we're going to go with the big studio and this different director. And I told Amanda, and I said, it's over. They said no. And I said, this new studio is apparently very excited about it. So I go back to my office and I sit down, and literally pops up on the screen. Pray for pageant.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I can't do it anymore. And I went to delete it. And I can remember it as clear as day. I might even get emotional remembering this because I just remember like I literally moved the mouse to click the delete, and I felt God just go, not yet. Don't do that. And it's just one of those handful of times in my life where I really felt clear,
Yeah.
like this isn't me. I was like, okay. And so I went, all right, I'll pray for pageants. And I did the prayer again. This time I'm really frustrated. I'm like, don't get my hopes up anymore. Then Amanda comes into my office and goes, I was just kind of praying and frustrated and talking to God. And I felt God just put really clear on my heart. It's not over. I'm like, oh crap, don't tell me that. Because again, I'm going to keep getting my hopes up. And I don't want to keep getting disappointed. So a couple years late go by, and this is just a few years ago now. I check in again. I go, it's Dallas, time for my annual check-in. You know, what's the rights situation? He goes, funny you should check in. A week ago, the studio forgot to renew the rights, and now they're back with us.
Oh, wow.
And they really want to renew them, but we've been frustrated it's been taking so long. And he goes, just a couple days ago, my mom called me out of the blue. She's in her 70s. And she said, have you heard of this show called The Chosen? And he goes, well, that's funny you should say that. The creator of the show is always bugging me about getting the rights to Chris's pageant. She goes, you better give him the rights. He's the only one who can make this movie. Are you kidding me? Wow. You got to watch this show. And so he's like, I got to listen to my mom. And so he watched the show and loved it and then said, let's talk. And so this conversation we're having right now, that you've watched the best Christmas pageant ever movie that I got a chance to make, that we've been working on and thinking about and praying over and envisioning for 20 years is really I don't like to use the term dream come true all the time, but it's like a calling fulfilled. Like I just knew that this story I had to tell. Now, when I started The Chosen, of course, Best Christmas Pageant Ever is still in the back of my mind. But to answer your original question, that came first. That was whenever people would ask me, what's the one story you really want to tell or the one movie you want to make? I'd be like, Best Christmas Pageant Ever. The Chosen became something that, of
paved
course,
the way for it.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Like now, I think it's accomplished a little bit more than just set up for the Christmas pageant. But I'm like, we sometimes think of it as The Chosen is the thing that got us the best Christmas pageant ever. Yeah. But the through line of both of these projects is telling the stories of Jesus, but from unique perspectives that you haven't considered before. And
so then you see the story in this new fresh way.
Right. Seeing it for what it really was, which is sacrifice and humility and poverty and outcasts.
And sincerity. I mean, I feel like I'm not going to give the best part of the movie away, but every movie has a salvation scene or whatever the scene is where there's the success that comes out of it. And that moment, what it was, if I were to put it in one word, it was a sincere experience with Christ. And it's so difficult to do films about Christ because you don't want to come across as preaching at someone. But I felt like when I watched it, that moment, it was the sincerity that drew the church in.
Yeah.
It
felt
was
organic.
a sincere silence.
Yeah.
There was a silence in that part of the movie that I thought, where is this going? And it settled in.
Yeah.
And I got real emotional, and I look over at Jase, and he's wiping his tears, So it is about Christ, and it makes it very personal, which is what you want with the Lord.
Well, what I was thinking in that moment, because I didn't share this with you, but when I was watching that, so when my dad came to Christ, and then we eventually followed, we're living in a community where it's hard to describe these people, people that live around my dad. Some people call them river rats.
They're not red. They're not red. It's more than redneck.
It's more than
deeper.
redneck.
It's deeper into the woods.
And there's an element of danger that follows all that. But what flooded my mind was all those experiences, because we literally loved our neighbors as followers of Jesus. And I'm pretty sure everyone down there has heard the story of Jesus at some point. Well, some of these people we would invite, and they would come to church with us. Mm-hmm. And it was so amazing just in that moment of the movie, how all of these little memories flooded. Because I remember, we had a guest family with us. They're hearing people sing, and you're thinking, I'm wondering what they're thinking. And I leaned over, and there was a guy who, was about my age, and he had tears in his eyes, which is probably the first time he's cried without, somebody trying to hurt him.
Right.
And I said, what are you all right? And he had our bulletin. Back then we had church bulletins. I'm not sure we still do. Yeah. He had a bulletin in his hand, and he pointed to a phrase, and it said, everyone is invited.
Yes.
And it was like some potluck somewhere. And I was like, why is that moving you so much? He's like, well, I've just, every time we'd ever been to church, I mean, they would be scared that everyone might come. And it just showed in his heart how divisive their family had been about how you look, how much money you have, or what color your skin is. And I was just really moved by that, of all the things that I thought would capture someone. But sometimes in churches, that comes across. Well, what if the world does show up?
Right.
It's a spirit of, well, we're not sure we want to deal with
and
these
all the
problems.
all the messiness that comes with it. The thing I love about the film, and what I love about what you're saying, is this idea of the little herdman group didn't get cleaned up before they came in, right? And no doubt, like as you're sharing about whatever death movie you're watching right after
Death
coming,
Wish.
Death Wish.
Pretty good movie, but watch
But
It is a good movie. It's
But doesn't
just
that
not
mean-
for 6-year-olds.
Not for 6-year-olds. It's not a child movie. But
But what a picture of how patient God is with us. We come and we don't automatically get everything in order.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, as Christians, we put that on other people. We're like, get cleaned up before you walk in, or immediately get cleaned up the moment that you come to Jesus. There's a lot of layers that God patiently works through with us and is still working through with us decades later. So I love that about the movie, that you see this little group and that they come in and that they capture the heart of Jesus, but they're not. It's come as you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Come as you are, just as you are. That's the gospel. We sometimes alter.
So, Jace, I'm kind of one of those dinosaurs with TV. You know, I have DirecTV, and the main reason is so I can watch the Dodgers play every night in football, and then I watch a little bit of Fox News and Triple D.
The streaming wars have passed you by, Al, but
Streaming's going on, but I don't know anything about it.
But a lot of people spend a lot of time watching various streaming things like Netflix, and this is where our sponsor comes in.
Yeah, ExpressVPN. Netflix has more than 18,000 titles globally, but only about 6,000 of those titles are available in the U.S. So you're paying for a subscription, but you're missing out on literally thousands of great movies and shows unless you use ExpressVPN. Here's how it works. Netflix hides content from you based on your location, but ExpressVPN lets you change your online location so you can control where you want Netflix to think you are watching from. ExpressVPN has servers in over 100 countries, so you can gain access to thousands of new shows and movies and never run out of stuff to watch. And it's not just Netflix. This works with many other streaming services like Disney+, BBC, iPlayer, and more. This might sound complicated, and it does, to me, but it's really not. Just open up the ExpressVPN app, click one button to change locations. It works on all your devices and has blazing fast speeds, so you can stream your shows in HD anytime, anywhere with zero buffering. So be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/unashamed. Don't forget to use the link at expressvpn.com/unashamed to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free.
Oh, there's no
Gospel.
doubt. And my parents seem to have a deeper appreciation of that sense of where they came from. And so we would invite these cast of characters every week into their home. And there's a famous story, Zach knows this story. One of the women that came who had some mental issues, and my parents loved her. But one night after we had the meal, they would call these pig outs. And my dad said, if you feed them, they'll come. And then he would share Jesus. And it actually worked.
Which is true.
Which happens in the movie too. The kids come because they hear
they
their
take
snacks at
everything.
church.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So these are all the memories of us flooding. But one night's a famous story that we've told many times. But my mom always, and my grandma before her, because we had so many pets and that would just roam and people would come down to this area and dump out dogs, and my parents would take them in. And so there's just so many animals. So my mom would have a big skillet where she would put the scraps and grease and all these things. And once it got full, she would let the dogs just tear off into it in the yard. Well, that woman who was there, no one knew this, but she fixed her plate from that pot. And as she's eating it, which is a week's worth of debris that are left over,
Oh, gosh.
she asked my mom, I'd like to get this recipe from
Sweetie. Yeah.
Even the scraps were good. That's what he's saying.
You know, and you're like, what a perspective here.
Yeah.
This woman has not been living off the hog here, you know.
Well,
So-
there's a moment in the film that I think also you can relate to is when the dad, and this is one of the things I'm proud of with the film too, and this is from the book, but the mom is kind of the main character. It's a love letter in many ways to stay-at-home moms who volunteer at church, but we also don't make the dad kind of the dumb, bumbling guy off to the side.
Thank you so much.
At one point,
Yeah.
well, at one point he says to the family, he knows the Herdmans are bad, but he also, because he's on the charitable works committee at the church and he's the one who helps deliver things to families in need, he also says, you know what, family, keep talking about the Herdmans. I think you need to see something. And they join him to deliver a Christmas ham to the Herdmans. And in that moment, that's the moment that causes the mom and the daughter to kind of shift perspective when they see how the kids react to a ham.
Yeah.
The kids are so excited and so happy. Oh my gosh, it's the ham man when he shows up. And they've never seen the Herdmans smile or act, but they're like, oh my gosh, for a single ham, this is how they're reacting. And it's similar to the story you just told. Yeah. And she also he says, "Where is your mom home?" And she says, "Oh, not when the sun's up." And they're realizing, okay, this is opening us up. There's a why to their behavior, you know.
Yeah. But that's in all your projects. That's the reason they turn out good is these subtleties and details that you don't have to over-explain the obvious.
Right.
I think that was really appealing because we all get it. And even in the kids, which is an embellished kind of version as it starts off, which I had to I was like, Missy, I was like, no.
It's a heightened reality.
Because it's coming from their perspective.
Yeah, it's reality.
What you call it, heightened
reality.
reality.
That's kid kind of.
Well, when I was talking to the production designer and the costumer and the director of photography and even the actors, I said this is the kids' version of this story, like A Christmas Story, which again you haven't seen, but one of the things that you probably recognize, Missy, is it's the same thing with that show, The Wonder Years, because it's from a kid's perspective. Things are just a little bit exaggerated. You know, and everything's a little bigger, and that is a bit of a heightened reality, which I think makes then the real moments, the ones that are less heightened, even more impactful.
Yeah, because I'm getting it. I was wondering how the sausage was made in that, and I was wondering how you got these kids. I mean, how many takes does it take? Because when I'm not a TV guy until we were thrust into TV, but I remember every time we had little kids or pets, there was a joke among the production
never work
people,
with kids or pets. Yeah,
never do this. So I was just wondering. I mean, that had to be quite the challenge.
Yeah, it was very challenging, and you've also got limited time because of child labor laws. Those crazy child labor laws that keep us from abusing these children.
What are they thinking?
But you only get them for a certain amount of time, and you can't go into overtime. They use the term pumpkin, which is matching your shirt.
Thank you.
But they say the kid pumpkins at X time, and pumpkin is like a reference to Cinderella. Is that at this point the kid turns into a pumpkin, you cannot go into overtime. You can't pay more money to work them. They're gone. So we had this X amount of time, and I've got a bunch of kids working with, and all with varying degrees of ADHD and OCD and all the other things.
Kids.
Yeah, of course.
And there are kids that want to be actors, which means mom was looking for an outlet.
So they were great, and the parents were great. It all went well, but it is herding cats. I mean, the cliche is true. So I'm a little bit equipped for that. I'm a parent of 4 kids. I have an adopted son. We've done a lot of work in special needs ministry, which really helps you learn how to corral difficult to corral people. So I was able to do it, but it still doesn't take away from the urgency and the stress of it. And then they've got to hit their mark. They've got to say what they're supposed to say.
For a kiddo.
So it was a lot, and we'd have a couple of scenes that were longer, and the kids are sitting there for that whole time. So it wasn't easy. But another thing, because I know you like some of these behind the scenes insights. Sometimes the kids are going to be gone before the scene's done filming. And so you have to shoot their coverage, which is when the camera's on them, shoot them first. And then Judy Greer, who plays the mom, and Lauren Graham, who from Gilmore Girls and Parenthood, she plays the narrator, and she shows up at the end of the movie. Sometimes they'd have to act with a piece of tape, stuck to the side of the camera, and they're they're responding to someone who's reading the kids' lines off screen because you couldn't have the kids there. So that was a challenge as well. But even in those scenes where some of the kids are crying, or there's an emotional scene, like those kids, that was real tears. I mean, some of these kids are really
were great.
Great actors.
Well,
great
that's why I
actors.
asked the question, because I was really fascinated. I was like, did they buy into this story, or is it just God's presence in this?
A lot of both of that.
A little bit of both, and they really loved each other, and Dallas is really, really wonderful with kids, and so that created an environment that was just actually enjoyable. It wasn't just like he was fun, and they were. They understood what they were doing. He always makes sure his people understand the point of what you're doing and what are we saying here, and so they just. It was a great experience.
And that leads to The Chosen too. That's how we met, is because of The Chosen. You guys were going to have me on the podcast to talk about it because your dad was actually a big fan of it.
Oh yeah.
And he doesn't normally watch TV, but we ended up being on the podcast together and then became friends. But speaking of bringing up The Chosen, because your question is about also what do the actors think being part of something that is so clearly gospel centric.
Yeah.
Right. And some people have asked, like, what is it like? The actors like, what do they believe? And the majority of our cast on The Chosen aren't believers, or at least not traditional believers. Majority of the cast on Best Christmas Pageant Ever, same thing. But when there's a story that's well told, and there's clearly also, when it comes to especially these gospel stories, where there's this almost transcendent hope, there's something beyond just what we're experiencing in the flesh that I think really speaks to people, regardless of whether you know exactly who you are talking about. Yeah. When the message of the Gospels hits, or when there's a Bible story that's accurately told, I think God does something. And so we see all the time, the actors will be stirred emotionally, even if they don't necessarily, it's not something they typically practice, but it overwhelms them. And sometimes they'll even tell me, I don't know what happened in that scene. I was just,
and you're like, I know what happened.
I'm like, I know exactly what happened.
I had, just to back up a little bit, which was part of the reason I loved making this film, is that, like we said, it's a little bit of it's kind of a I don't want to say Trojan horse because it's pretty overt, but it's a way to tell the story of Jesus in a way that a lot of people will enjoy, not
Trojan
just
horse refers to a classic Greek story.
Classic Greek story.
I actually think
Troy.
Yeah, okay.
That's more up your
But
alley.
the Trojan horse comes in and it looks like just a big wooden horse, but there's an army inside of it, right?
Well, when I first saw that movie, I thought, no, this is a cool story.
This is a good one. I like this one.
That's a good idea for a war.
Yeah. Okay, here's the point. When we were casting this movie with all these little kids, and I was watching tape after tape after tape. I tend to be one of the first layers before it.
She's like a co-casting director. She really does. She has women, I think, especially have really good instincts for kind of the character beneath the surface. Mm-hmm. And so she, there's a lot. That's why I think most casting directors are women. They just, sometimes I'll be like, he's a really good actor.
Kind of get a read on.
And she'll be like, he doesn't quite inhabit that persona. And I'm like, okay, I wouldn't have really picked up on that as much. So, anyway.
So I was watching so much tape of so many kids. And the words that I grew up with as a Christian, like simple things like frankincense or a name like Herod, where you
Herod,
you know those words were being butchered and mispronounced. And I remember, I'm watching tape in like a kind of a business way, right? Like like a detached way where I'm just evaluating talent. And all of a sudden I realize it's been video after video after video of kids not knowing these words,
who don't really
not
know
hearing
the
the story.
story.
And when a kid is reading on a camera, when they're doing an audition on a camera, they're reading with a parent. They're reading with an adult who also does not know that word. And I just realized how many people have not actually heard this Christmas story. Like we're doing this story because we want people to know the Christmas story, but these littles get to hear the Christmas story. Like the first ones to hear it were the ones acting. And The Chosen is often like that too, where we get to talk about Bible stories really quite freely with people who've never heard them because it's the nature of the work. But it was really sad to me how many people hadn't heard the Christmas story, or at least enough to know those really common words to us.
That we take for granted. That's what the movie is. And these kids in the first
I just started
rehearsal.
crying. I had to take a minute. I was crying while I was trying to get through tape.
Well, I think the film's I think it's gonna be, you're gonna get a lot of people show up just because it's Christmas time, the name of the, and they're not going to realize.
Well,
what
yeah,
they're
well, that's
walking
what she
into.
means by Trojan horse. Is
Yeah.
it's Lionsgate, big Hollywood studio, releasing this in theaters all over the country, and it just looks like a classic Christmas theatrical movie.
Yeah.
And it is, and I didn't make it overly
No, it's not
overly
preachy, it's
ponderous or anything like that, like maybe a typical church movie. But it's funny, and it's got all the things that, I mean, people haven't batted an eye. We've had lots of non-believers who've watched it and just love the story. But yeah, there's something transcendent about the true story.
I love the perspective. I mean, of course, I kind of I related to the mom and the church part of it for sure, and the light bulb going off of forget what we're trying to do and focus on these children, which is kind of what we came from this past weekend with our Miamu Fun Day, is what it's called.
Right.
Is forget the schedule, forget what we normally do, and focus on the children and on the families and what their needs are at the moment. So we've kind of were focused on trying to focus, if that makes sense. There's a part in the movie that was unexpected to me in the library when the older sister is finally dealing with some of the younger siblings not wanting to do it, and they're kind of complaining and they're not happy about this. They're really here just for the snacks.
Yeah, like
you know?
why are, and she's like,
Why are
you
we
need
doing
to
all
read
this?
about the
Having
characters
to
you're
do all
playing.
this work.
She's exploring the story because she wants to
And
understand
that moment where she said, y'all aren't getting it. We can become someone else for just a little period of time.
Yeah.
And that just went all over me because I think because of the Miamu kids, I'm going to get choked up about that.
We do all the time. I'm with you. I'm right with you right now. Yeah.
But just to, the children in our own lives, Karina and our baby that we have, AK.
Mm-hmm.
I hope one day AK does not have to say that.
Yeah.
Say, I just want to play someone else just for a period of time. We pray all the time. His life is going to be great. It's going to be redeemed. Karina has already lived through that, being an orphan from Nicaragua.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about her childhood. Like, how many times did she say that? I wish I could have been someone else for at least a period of time. So this movie is not just for the regular church-going folks who want to kind of pay attention for a little while to some needy children over the holiday season.
Yeah. This
is for people who are living a life that they wish they could become someone else, and they can through Christ. And that's what
forever.
this is about.
Not for a little while, but
not
forever.
just
That's such
for
a great-
just a small part of their life.
That's really well said. I'm gonna steal that.
It was. That's why I said there were deeper things. And even in Jesus's ministry, what I liked is you subtly made fun of a lot of church functions and just missing the power of who Jesus is. I mean, you just do the same thing over and over. And think about what American churches do. We do the same thing every week. We do the same thing every Christmas. But it's almost sometimes turns into a bit of a yawner. And so there was some subtle, darts being thrown at kind of how this loses its purpose, and yet finding your passion in really who Jesus is, the real, authentic Jesus.
Well,
Go ahead.
I have a question I wanted to ask y'all about that because, the funny parts of the movie, I mean, I was laughing out loud. I'm easily entertained in a movie. I just am, So I'm laughing. Jace is not really, but he's not a laugh out loud kind of guy, so I'm laughing a lot. But when the lady, has the injury and breaks her leg and she can't direct for this year, and you think if you're living in that moment, and that woman, I'm sure, thought, look what Satan is trying to do. He's trying to ruin this Christmas pageant.
Right.
Something good is going to happen because Satan is working so hard. And, we talked about this previously on the podcast where we talked about the Miamu Fund, but Satan really, really worked this past weekend in trying to stop what was happening during our weekend. My question to you is, even in The Chosen, even in Christmas pageant, and even in your own personal lives, with the rise of the fame and all the glory, basically, that people are shoving your way, when have you seen Satan say, oh, yeah, you think you're all that in a bag of chips? I'm going to stop you. And then God comes right in and paves the way again. Have you seen that? How many times? Do you have any examples?
Yeah.
With mind-numbing regularity.
Yes.
It has been constant. And in fact, that was one of the things that we valued about our friendship when we first got to know you, is that you experienced a similar kind of hyper fueled
Yeah.
Like from 0 to 60 in terms of
The takeoff of the show.
whether you want to call it success or just being well known or whatever, or and many also impact.
It's hard to even describe what it is.
Spiritual
it's just
impact.
like a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
That you're not expecting.
And so then you go, all right, well, the tough thing about this is how fast it's growing, and we're just kind of our heads spinning and all this. But the good news is we're now a little bit more successful. We can relax a little bit. We can be content with what we've got. This is what we've been seeking for a long time, is to be able to make a living off of this career. And certainly that's going to happen now because of the success of the show. And then you look back of the last 5 years ago, these have been the hardest 5 years of our life, without a close second. And you think even when you have security in your job or even financially, and you go, that should at least provide a little bit of stability. Oh, it has been the opposite. I mean, that last year has been the hardest year of our life.
Yeah.
So you can talk about where Satan has come after us the most.
Well, I mean, we're dealing with chronic illness. This in the last year, that's been the thing with one of our kids, and I'm not blaming Satan for that. I don't know the source of that. Sometimes that comes, either way, it ultimately comes from the hand of God. So it's something that He's allowing. But what we're seeing then in that is like just that in your ear all the time about doubting God's goodness, right? Doubting His love for your kid, feeling like we don't even have margin for this. Like I am going from specialist to specialist, and I don't even have time. I've got books due. We've got places we're supposed to, and yet.
I mean, you guys know this
right?
as well
this
as anyone
is,
with your daughter, where you just go, this is when someone says, "How can we pray for you?" or what, you're like, just for us, it's Maya.
Pray
You,
for our
Mia.
kid. Pray for our
How
kid.
much time do you have?
Yeah, exactly.
But people come up and they're like, "How's Mia?" And even if you've just been through a surgery or some weird diagnosis, or we're going in a different direction, but I'm like, how am I going to say this in one sentence?
I know.
And it's like,
I know. I'm always just a little like,
So
I don't know how to answer.
Keep sharing, but
about
hand me the
things
Bible,
are.
because this is a Bible podcast.
okay.
And but keep going.
But so what we see is really in our ears. Also, we had some weird spiritual stuff happening inside our house with multiple kids, where you're just like, I'm not one to call things to say it's a demon, but there have been some weird things. So overt attacks and then this quiet, like if he can get us to doubt, right? If he can get us to be just even distracted. I feel like we almost for each other now, and we've got mostly adult kids, but now between even our kids and each other, it's like, wait a second, that seems like that's not a voice you should be listening to.
Oh, we had come to Jesus meetings a lot in our living room with everyone, like a check-in.
Yeah.
We had daily check-ins. Jason and I did during Duck Dynasty, but we would check in on our kids every few days. Come to Jesus meeting because we felt something was off.
Something's
and
off.
We had to get it right.
Yeah, and I
track.
think the most common and most effective attack would be marriage. Just getting at each other. There are times where I've been like, I am uniquely irritated with him. Right? And then I'm like,
uniquely irritated?
Uniquely irritated.
That's a new term.
Yeah. Right. But it's those times where I'm like,
it's a good name for a
I am
podcast.
being,
Uniquely
like,
irritated
poked.
with the Jenkins.
Yeah. Where you just know you're being poked. You're being because I can be annoyed all by myself. But like sometimes it's just this next level of stirring things up all the time, stirring things up to actually
divide that partnership.
Yeah.
Well, Exodus 14 is the story of the parting of the Red Sea. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we were in a moment in the show that we've experienced constantly, to your point of, we got nowhere to go. We've done everything we're supposed to do. We're in the right spirit. We're surrendering to God on it. Our ego's not in the way, but every decision we've made to get us to this point has run out now of space, and we have nothing left. Like if we're going to move forward, the only way to move forward is if God does something, right?
And in that case, it was a literal, we can't shoot. If this doesn't happen, we can't even.
So I said to her, we just were told no. This is similar to our Christmas pageant story, where we just got told no, it's not going to happen. And this one always, when God has put something on her heart, to her credit, nothing's going to get her off that that plane. She knows she knows that she knows. And so we had been in this one story. I'll just very quickly share. We were looking for a location to film season 2, and every location it was during COVID. Everything was shutting down. Then we had the opportunity for this big set in Utah, and God had really laid it on my heart when I was on the set. Like, some of the things you film here are going to change the world, and we're going to do this is a place. This is a special place, and I really felt that. And then when they said no, you can't use it, I'm like, I guess I was wrong. I guess I didn't hear properly. I guess God's voice, I mixed it up with my own. But Amanda had the same passion and the same impression from the Lord. And she goes, no. I'm like, they just said no. She goes, yeah, I just think that's God putting you at the edge of the Red Sea so that when the waters part, you know it's him.
Wow.
And I'm like, quit saying that, because that's going to get, I'm getting my hopes up.
Literally
2 days later, it's a long story, but like things that never would have normally happened. People who weren't even in their office felt this impression from God to check in, and then
who had control of the location.
Two days later, it's like it's a yes, and we're filming at this location. So we start referring to them as Red Sea moments. Mm-hmm. And here's what's so interesting about the story of the parting of the Red Sea. So Exodus 14, then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near, and then he gives all these terms that I don't know how to pronounce, of Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. And he says it again, they are to encamp by the sea. And so he's used the word encamp twice now in 2 verses. So he's not saying, I want you to go there and hold on. He's saying, I want you to go there and actually set up tents. You're going to be there for a bit.
And wait.
And you're going to be
and all
there.
The words that you're not reading, it was geographical location. It was really specific. Like they're names of geographical locations.
And here's why. So, and it's the worst place to encamp. He says, Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by a desert. They are hemmed in by a desert, and the sea is the only thing there, and there's nowhere else to go. So you're stuck. And he told them to hang there, right? And camp. You know what camping is like. I'm not a camper. And I will harden.
You hear what camping.
And here's the other thing. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. So again, he's going, I'm going to do this thing that's really bad. I'm going to make a bad guy even worse, and he's going to pursue you. And then he says this for the first time, and he says this 3 times in this chapter, but I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So then the story continues. When the king of Egypt was told the people had fled, Pharaoh changed his mind, gets all these chariots, all these horsemen, all these people are going to go chase him down. He's like, how could we let them go? We couldn't have done this. So now they're pursuing. As Pharaoh approached, this is verse 10, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? And there's more. It's a famous story of when they were like, we would have rather been slaved than and we told you this at the time, Moses, and now you're here. So Moses says, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. And then I love this sentence. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. It's like such a PG version of saying like they're going to die. But he's like, you're seeing them now, you will not see them again.
This was a legitimate death wish.
Yes. Thank you. Always bring it back to his childhood.
Yeah, thank you.
This is why you saw that movie. It was for the Lord. The Lord, and here's the other thing. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And another version that I normally read, ESV, is you only need to be silent.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that. She's not good at that. We solve problems. He's like, you just sit there in camp and be silent or be still.
Watching the problems descend upon you.
So then, so then God says to Moses, raise your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians. Again, he's like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to allow it. I'm actually going to make them make a decision that is very threatening and dangerous. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. And then he says again, when I gain glory, just in case Moses missed it the first 2 times, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And that's the other interesting phrase. When he says gain glory, he says through Pharaoh. I'm going to gain glory through the bad thing, through the hard thing.
Yeah.
So then the angel of the Lord had been traveling in front of them, and then you of course know the story. They stretch the hand out over the sea, the waters part, they get through. The Egyptians come through, get completely drowned. And it ends with the chapter ends with, when the Israelites saw the great power the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. It's a final little nugget that I gained from that story. He doesn't call Moses his leader, because I'm the guy who's been tasked to tell the story of The Chosen. I was the guy who was tasked to tell the story of the best Christmas pageant ever, and that's a leadership position. And this chapter of this book telling about the most famous leader in history, Moses, besides other than Jesus, of course, Moses, and he's referred to as a servant.
Yeah.
And so this is a very long answer to your question, original question, but this is a Bible podcast. But we see that over and over and over again, to a point where sometimes we'll know it's a God thing because of how weird it is.
How awful it is.
Like,
We're
why did you?
okay,
Like, there was this
we're
one
on
day.
it.
It's another long story that I've told before, but where the weather was supposed to be bad. We only had one day to shoot. The weather was supposed to be bad. Amanda felt the impression from the Lord that we were going to be fine. And we get to the day of filming, and the fog is so thick we can't see 20 feet in front of our face. And so for 8 hours, we couldn't film. And to the point where we literally got in our cars, and as we were driving out of the parking lot, and as we had just decided we had to cancel these scenes, and my writers and I were trying to figure out how to rewrite them and figure them out in a different location, literally a wind gust comes, the fog lifts in less than 5 minutes. You're an outdoorsman, you probably haven't seen that too often. It usually takes time to dissipate. Just fog lifts. And not only do we end up getting to shoot everything that we normally would take 12 hours, we got it done in 4, because as the sun was setting, it was reflecting off of the fog, which extended the day for us, and we could get everything we needed. Now you can say, why does that even need to happen? Why didn't God just make it easy from day one? This is a Jesus project. It's his project. He wants it to succeed. Why put the fog there in the first place? Or if there's going to be fog there from non-spiritual reasons, why not just give us a good day? Yeah. And I truly believe it's this Red Sea thing. He tells you to encamp. He tells you to see. He could have just not even had the Egyptians pursue the Israelites. Yeah. Why not just release them, let them go, and they'll praise God that they're free. Yeah. He constantly, throughout the book of Exodus, put these hardened people's hearts, put resistance in front of them, gave them giants to conquer, put walls up that they had to use a miracle, rely on a miracle to be saved. That happens constantly.
For his glory. And
he will gain glory.
Yeah. It's so moving to hear, but so hard to live out. Yeah. You should do a project on Moses.
That's a really good point, Jase.
Okay. So starts here.
So what a coincidence. We just announced to the world that we were doing a Moses show. Yeah. But that's one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to tell that story after The Chosen.
That's just where God's had us. Yeah.
Because God has had us so many times as, again, underqualified participants, leaders / servants of something that's grown so much bigger than you're capable of. Yeah. And so when Moses was like, but I'm not a good speaker, and God's like, well, I'll do this for you. So I know how to direct projects, but there is a limit to how good I am, and The Chosen has far exceeded that limit. It is much better than I am, and it's so clear and it's easy to be humble.
It's a really good material.
Yeah.
Well, I've got good news. I've got good news that when we go over this far without making a break, that means it's a great podcast. Yeah. The bad news is that we are over. Yeah. So we're way over, but we're gonna air the whole thing because I think this was such a great conversation. So good. So if you're listening, you're getting a bonus 5 or 6 minutes here. But so where can we send people, our audience, if they want to find out about the film? Yeah. Is there a website to go to now?
Well, it's like in any other movie. You just look at your local theater. Yeah. So it comes out officially November 8th. So that's Friday. But this Saturday, November 2nd, is the early access opportunity. So if you want, and there's also the opportunity, I believe you can get, I don't want to, there's a possibility. I don't want, because I don't know this 100%, but I'm pretty sure you get your kids' tickets are free.
Yeah, I think they told me that too. I don't have the.
It's like a buy one for yourself.
We'll
your
put
kid
it in the
comes
show
free.
notes. Yeah. So if you're listening or watching, look in the show notes. Look in the description. We'll have the information of how you can get free tickets for your kids.
But if that's not the
What if
case
you have
anymore,
I have 5 kids.
yeah,
so-
no, it's just. Well, I think it's buy one get one free. So
Yeah.
it's
There's a
like
limit.
I don't think there's 5 parents of these kids. So I think your first 2 kids are free. The rest are afterwards. But
come as you are. Come as you are.
yeah. Everyone is invited.
Everyone's invited.
Everyone's invited.
Yes.
Baby.
But but at the early access screenings, if you come a week in advance, you get to see actually a season 5 chosen scene that you can't see anywhere else. It's a scene from The Last Supper, actually. And it's only available in front of Best Christmas Pageant Ever on November 2nd. After that, you'll have to wait till season 5 comes out.
And actually, don't put it off till Christmas because we might not make it to Christmas if we don't have a couple good opening weekends. So that's the nature of the film world is you have to do well in the theaters to stay in the theaters. So we actually
because
need people
eventually
to go.
Thanksgiving comes and Wicked comes out, and then Moana 2 and all these other
A lot
friendly
of good
movies.
stuff. We
Yeah,
just
so we
gotta show up
need you to come to
there.
our
We
good
gotta
stuff.
show
too.
Well, I mean, Unashamed Nation is headed toward
they're
the
gonna
sea.
show up.
They're
Yeah.
going to head
I
to the
promise
sea
you.
and be
We
still.
might have to buy out one of our local theaters again.
Babe.
Yeah, good
Which, I mean,
idea.
honestly, though, I was going to say this. Like, I know, like, because we did The Blind, I was saying, if you want to see more films like this, go watch it. But the truth is this film stands on its own. Like, it's not a charity. I mean, this is
I always say that too. Like, don't do it out of guilt just because I'm asking you
It's
to.
a great
It's
film.
so good.
Yeah.
It's so
And
good.
how many films can you take your kids to these days? I mean,
yeah.
I'm just excited to have a film I
Good,
can take my
clean
entire
fun.
family to that we
Well,
can
that's something
enjoy.
that's actually unique when you think of, and if you want to call this a faith-based movie, I suppose it is because I'm a Jesus guy. But when you think of faith-based films, there's actually I can't really think of any that are family films.
Yeah.
Like they're clean, you can take your kids to them, but they're not. Even The Blind, is like that's not necessarily one that like an 8-year-old is going to necessarily appreciate. And even some of the more successful ones, but this is one that really this is a family experience movie. It hopefully becomes a Christmas classic.
Lots to talk about. Lots of conversation around the table afterwards.
Yeah,
Yes.
There really is a lot to digest, hopefully, and that's
Well,
why I was
thank you guys
glad to talk
for
about
coming
it here.
to our new studio.
The best unashamed recording in history
ever. So we
the most comfortable
We'll
one.
break
At
the
least.
internet here. Make sure you share this episode as well on all your social media platforms if you're listening. So, thank you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks for doing
guys.
this. So good to see you.
We gotta keep meeting like this.
Hug.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.